Shalom Aleichem. Good Chodesh. I want to dedicate today's talk to Rabbi Mordechai Goldstein, Zecher Tzadik Yivrocha, Rosh Yeshiva of the Diaspora Yeshiva Torah Israel, who passed away this past Friday, last week. The world here in Eretz Yisrael has changed tremendously. We don't realize it. As we all know, history is moving so quickly with technology and so forth. It happens so quick. We often, unless we take the time to stop and think, we don't realize even what's happened. And today in Israel, there is, just as an example, you have so much supermarket chains of glatt kosher, super kosher food available throughout the country, everywhere. And it was only 30 years ago or so, 35 years ago, and there was none of it. It was difficult to find kosher meat in certain places, and then all kinds of products. It's just an example, and the world has just changed so much. And one of those ways is that back then, when Rabbi Goldstein started his yeshiva, right after the 6-Day War, which is a time when many young Jewish people came to Israel and feeling the kind of the glow of the miracle of that war, they were looking for their Jewish roots and Jewish heritage, and but there was no place to go because the so-called traditional Torah world, yeshiva world, was not open to them. The doors were not open for them. And Rabbi Goldstein opened his arms to everybody, to anybody. So therefore, any backpack traveling hippie was welcome by the Rebbe to come and to learn Torah. Now, why would they want to learn Torah or come to learn Torah? So his whole approach was very special and very unique. The rabbi's love of Torah was so deep and overriding, so that was really why he didn't care how the person looked or externally. He was only really interested in their heart and them as a person, and showing them affection and care. And he would, rather than try to engage them in some sort of dialectic in order to convince them, come learn Torah, or there is God, or God cares about you, or who knows what, he would simply present them. He would just ask them a question from what he himself was learning in the Torah, whether it was in the Talmud or in the Chumash or whatever. He would have some interesting question or dilemma, and he would share it with that person. However, and they may have had no background whatsoever. They didn't know Aleph Bet. They didn't know anything, and he would just share with them some dilemma from the Torah itself, and because he was like a living Sefer Torah, and then through that, people they'd put the backpack down and they'd say, why not spend a few nights? And it was to keep the yeshiva open was a tremendous battle. Today, there are Baruch Hashem, there are huge organizations that have brilliant people working for them, and in Israel and throughout the world, to present, just to have the knowledge, the information, the accessibility of Torah to anybody and everybody. Regardless of anything, and even via and access in every possible way, whereas then it was the Torah, how should we call it, establishment at the time in Israel and throughout history has always been very, in a certain sense, careful. Some people would call it insular, but it was they were very careful because after all, a Sefer Torah, when the archaeologists find a Torah scroll from thousands of years ago, every single letter is the exact same letter as today. If a Torah scroll is missing one letter, the entire Sefer scroll is invalid. So the the reason why Judaism and Torah there's such a renaissance of it today, and it's flourishing, is because we've protected and safeguarded and kept the unbroken tradition so faithfully and literally by giving our lives for it for all these thousands of years. So it's understandable that they were not so quick to accept newcomers, but the newcomers were very strange, as we might remember. Back in those days, people came looking very unusual, and at any rate, so they wanted to close the yeshiva. So the Rosh Yeshiva was given an ultimatum: or he gets 3 of the great rabbis of the day to sign a letter stating that they support the yeshiva and that it should be able to stay open, or else the yeshiva will be closed. Will be closed. It'll be just shut down. It's not proper to be teaching Torah to all kinds of riffraff. So there was a Rabbi Frank Zecher Tzaddik, and he was very fond of the Rosh Yeshiva and believed strongly in what he was doing. And Dr. Kahana Zecher Tzaddik, he was the first minister of religions of Israel, and he thought Mount Zion would be the perfect place to make a yeshiva, because there's King David's tomb, which is of the past and also represents the future, redemption, and also he established the chamber of the Holocaust, which was really to be a cemetery for all of the communities that were destroyed, and nobody knew when those people, when it was the real Yortzeit, the day that they were murdered by the Nazis. So he felt that to have then this chamber of the Holocaust, and right on top of it to have the yeshiva of Jews now returning to the Torah and returning to their roots after all these thousands of years, and it was returning home not only physically but also spiritually was very beautiful. So they supported the Rosh Yeshiva and were able to, Rabbi Frank, by actually telling some of these great rabbis, he more or less threatened them and told them, "I'll meet you in the next world if you don't sign this." Meaning, I'm going to hold you responsible. And sure enough, they all signed it. One of them was Rav Kook, Zecher Tzaddik Yivrocha, but there were 2 of the other Gedolim, great Torah sages of the day, and they signed, and the yeshiva stayed open, and it was a tremendous battle. But as a result, there were many great Torah luminaries that emerged. Rabbi Green, who's the Rosh Yeshiva of Birkas Torah, and then is now a rabbi of the community. Started the community in Phoenix, Arizona, I believe. But many others who have written many books and rabbis in different communities in Israel and throughout the world. Rabbi Gold, the Yeshivas Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Weiss, of Yeshivas Rabbi Akiva. This great yeshiva is in large part thanks to Rabbi Goldstein, and who really sacrificed that the Torah is the heritage of everybody, and everybody should be given. And also, there was a big problem in those days. If a person decided to get involved with Torah, and they decide, they loved it, and they tasted the sweetness of Torah. The Rosh Yeshiva always said, once a person would taste the sweetness of Torah, when he would get them involved in a piece of Torah, once they taste the sweetness of it themselves, he doesn't have to convince them or lure them or argue them or cajole them. At that point, the person is they fall in love. And that's it. So, speaking of falling in love, what was a person supposed to do to find then, if they wanted to really have a life of Torah? How are they supposed to find a mate? How are they supposed to find a wife? Because in those days, as we said, if someone was then Baal Tshuva, it was a stigma. It was something that made it very difficult to get around. What was going to happen to one's children, who was already too hard to even think about. But how does one find a wife? So the Rosh Yeshiva had a wonderful idea, a wonderful, brilliant plan, and he opened a women's division, and the idea being that only a women who had also little or no background in Torah, but if they would learn Torah, which again at the time was a very novel idea, being taught by Rabbi Green, Rabbi Gold, others teaching Torah, including the Ein Yaakov, which is the Agadata portions of the Talmud, for example, really teaching them, or the halacha from the source books themselves at the time, was radical, and a lot of people were against it. But he did that so that the women would also have a love and appreciation for what Torah was, because then they would be, of course, willing to marry these men, as well as dedicate their lives together in order to create a Torah life and to raise a family back home after 2,000 years in the way in which we do. So I'm sorry for going on for so long today. There's much to say, but I think I just wanted to distill it down to know that today it's taken for granted that a person can be from America or England, and they can be grew up and went to public school, and later they became religious, and they're a Baal Tshuva, and they can not only become faithful to our ancient heritage with the Torah and the mitzvahs, they can also become Torah luminaries. That was something that the Rosh Yeshiva also believed in strongly, different than many others. Everybody had their role, and there were of course other great rabbis at that time. However, he always believed that every Jew, any Jew, had the potential to be a Torah luminary, and every Jew has his own chelik in Torah, his own portion in Torah that the world needs, that we all need, and he did his best by sacrificing everything and giving all of his energy and love and wisdom in order to make that come true. So I hope that this will be a Ilui Neshama, elevation for his soul, and Yitzhak Hashem, I'm sure in the coming years, from his many thousands of Talmidim, there will be more. There will be books and information and history will show us the role that they're taking, and we should all have as we come to Hanukkah, we should all enjoy the light of Torah and the taste, the sweetness of Torah, and have a bracha to get ready for Hanukkah with a lot of joy.